Before we start today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. The content in this podcast is for general reference and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be complete or exhaustive or to be applicable to any specific individual's medical condition. No information provided in this podcast constitutes medical advice and is not an attempt to practice medicine or to provide specific medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please do not rely on this podcast for emergency medical treatment. Remember that everyone is different, so make sure you consult your own healthcare professional before seeking any new treatment and before you alter, suspend, or initiate a new change in your routine. Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets,
two internal medicine doctors who spent years practicing traditional primary care. Over time, we realized something was missing from modern healthcare. A real understanding of how everyday lifestyle choices impact overall health.
We'll help you cut through the noise of the countless health influencers and their conflicting opinions, because no matter who you follow, the basics of lifestyle medicine are at the heart of it all.
Welcome back to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets.
This week's episode is going to be a little different from our usual health topics. Earlier this year, Sarah and her family survived a devastating house fire. And true to who she is, Sarah has found purpose in the midst of this tragedy and feels strongly about sharing how to survive a house fire and why it's so important to have a plan in place. We're honored today to have our Lexington Fire Chief, Jason Wells, with us to help answer our questions and provide expert insight on all of this. Chief Wells, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you all so much for having me.
And Sarah, thank you for sharing all of this with us. I know this isn't easy.
Yes, I truly, as Kitty mentioned, am a believer that bad things do happen in life, but sometimes we have to take these bad things and make something good out of them. And I truly feel that my family was saved from this house fire as a way for us to be able to turn that around and promote fire safety so someone else can walk out of a house fire just the same way or not even experience one to begin with. That would be the ultimate goal here, because it's really easy to think this will never happen to you. And that's something that I do think it makes a big difference if you think about it and you have a plan of action. To get started today, I really want to first give my story. Some listeners may be familiar because this story spread throughout Lexington pretty quickly, but some of our listeners are not here and local. So I am going to share that, and then I also want to share what we found from the actual investigation of what caused the fire. And then we have Chief Wells here to answer some of the questions that I know we've had since our fire, as well as many people in our community and our neighborhood, because it is a very anxiety-provoking situation to occur. And we want to share this not to cause fear. That is not the purpose of the show. Instead, we want you to feel empowered on how to make a difference and prevent this from happening. And if you do, unfortunately, have to experience this, know how to get out safely in this situation, just because it's not something that is really talked about a lot. To get started, my family on January 26th at 5:21 a.m. experienced something that was just totally out of the blue. The night before, we had a regular night. We were at a birthday party, came home, didn't do anything different from our normal routine, went to bed, and I woke up at that 5:21 mark to the sound of crackles. And I remember waking up and just being like, what is that? That is such a weird sound. Like, crackles is not something that normally wakes us up. And as I sat up in the bed, our window in our bedroom has blinds, and there was a red tint. The first thing I thought was, that is really strange. Why would there be a police car or a fire truck behind our house with lights that would cause such a red tint in my window? And so I got up out of bed, pulled up the blinds, and I stared into a wall of fire outside of my window. Obviously, that causes you to be very scared, and I screamed very, very loud and yelled fire, and I immediately started barking orders to my husband and yelled, fire in the back of the house, you get Penny, that's our dog, and I got the kids, because I knew it was important that we had a plan and we had to go. And at that point, I ran from our room, didn't grab anything. I didn't grab my phone. I just ran to my girls' room, yelled at them, fire in the back of the house and out the front door. And as long as it looks safe, keep going, run. Don't grab anything. So my girls did exactly as I told them, and they were out the door. And then I went to my son's room, got him out of the crib, and we ran out of the house, not really grabbing anything, and got out the door. My husband put on his clothes, and he grabbed a phone thinking it was his, but it was actually my phone, and got Penny, who our dog sleeps upstairs with us, and got her out. He said it was very strange because she just wanted to stare at the red hue of the window, but he was able to get her out. They went down the stairs, and instead of going out the front door, they turned the corner and was going to go out the garage because my husband was thinking in that moment, hey, I want to get a car out of the garage. So he opened the garage door, got Penny out. And in that whole instance of him opening the garage door and grabbing the keys, because they were right there at the door, that's exactly when the fire blew into the house on that main floor because it singed his eyebrows. So when he came out, they were completely burnt. But he got Penny out, grabbed the keys, got one of our cars out of the garage, and he shut the door behind him, which was important. We didn't realize how important that was later, but that was important. And got in the Expedition and drove it out. To talk about the timing of this, it is crazy how quickly this all went. So at 5:21, when we woke up, the first alarm, it was not actually a smoke detector that woke us up. We actually heard our security system after I screamed because it caused a glass break to occur. And so that was the first set of alarms that actually happened in our house. And then as we were going down the stairs and the fire was blowing into that first floor, it caused another glass break, as well as in the basement, it caused another glass break. So those were the first alarms instead of our smoke detectors that were occurring in our house. And by the time that was 5:21, it started, we were out of the house by 5:23. Our neighbor was the one that called 911 because she heard all the screaming. And in that time, by 5:24, we heard an explosion. So we're all out of the house at that point. And the explosion, come to find out, was a propane tank in the back that got hit by the fire. And that's when our whole house became engulfed. At that time, it was then starting to blow towards our neighbors that we were able, to the right of us, to get them out as well. And the firefighters arrived by 5:29. And when they arrived, the fire was so intense, they were actually unable to enter the house. And so I share this timeline because between 5:21 to 5:29, that's 8 minutes, we could not actually enter the house at that point. It happened so fast. So I want to pause right there and just take a moment with Chief Wells before I go on to talk about the actual cause of the fire and have him explain about how quick fires can occur, and then also reflect on the fact of why it's so important to not take your time. Because I think that's one lesson that we learned in that moment, that our critical thinking of going quickly and not trying to grab things truly saved our lives.
You and your family are absolutely to be commended. It's remarkable how organized and orderly everything happened in your situation. Fires do grow exceedingly fast. So under normal conditions, a fire will double in size roughly every 1 minute. So if you think about something, for instance, a couch in a home that catches on fire, in that first minute, it's going to become twice that size, and all of these other things are happening. And that's without any external circumstances. So once a window fails, fire becomes fed by oxygen, and that growth becomes more explosive. If a fire taps into a gas line, then obviously that becomes explosive. And lots of other things that we may touch on will add to fire growth. It happens so much quicker than people recognize.
Never in a million years would I just think that it would be that quick, but it truly is. And I do think that our situation is a little rare of what happened. So up front, I will say that it was very hard in the days leading up to finding out what caused our fire, not knowing, because anyone that has experienced a traumatic event like this, it's hard to sit with the fact, did I cause this? Did I do something wrong? I will say that our family as a whole, it's not that we were naive to thinking a fire could happen to us. I grew up knowing that fires were real. My parents had a house fire before I was born. So I heard about them. I knew that it was important to have safety measures in place. Also grew up with a grandfather who was a firefighter his entire life for his career. So that was something that was, again, talked about with my family. And how devastating they can be was also something I was familiar with because my same grandfather, who was a firefighter, actually experienced a fire on a tractor and lost his life because of that. So to say that being naive, and that's the reason that many fires happen, that's false. Even if you know how scary and how critical they are, it is important to still have a plan in place because it can happen to anyone. When we were having to sit in these days, we were thinking about all this stuff that could have gone wrong. Did we do this? Did we do that? Did we forget to unplug X, Y, or Z? It was very hard. But I will say that walking through with the fire investigator that we had through our insurance, he explained so many things to me that has helped us have comfort. It is scary because our situation was very rare that happened, but I at least have an understanding of why it did happen. So that night, what likely happened when we were sleeping, or it could even have been that evening before we went to bed, that there was an electrical fire that started in our basement wall. Those can sit for a very long time, we were told, and you're unaware that it's occurring because it's encased within the wall. And what causes this sometimes is it could be after a recent renovation. It could be some faulty wiring. Sometimes, though, it could be from when a home was built and something accidental happened when the actual home was built, and it doesn't show up until decades later. So that's hard to sit with, but it was definitely not something that we could have prevented ourselves. And so when that fire started, because it was in the walls, the smoke detectors don't go off because all the smoke is encased. And it burned through the stories, and the crackling that woke me up that night, the fire probably had gone through the walls, and I heard it upstairs eventually. What caused it to become a big fire, though, was the fact that the electrical fire was started in the basement near a gas fireplace. And so as the gas line comes out into the fireplace, there's an area that it can melt with heat and then is ignited and makes what he explained to me was a giant torch. And that doesn't cause an explosion. So we didn't hear that happen when we were asleep. And so in the basement, as that torch was created from our fireplace, it then melted our back door because it was right next to it in the basement and vented the entire fire outwards at that point. And so we did have fire alarms in our basement. When our home was built, it was not code that all of these were wired together, though. Depending on when your home is built, sometimes the basement ones are battery operated, but they're not all linked. So there could have been a fire alarm going off earlier than when I heard the crackles. Our basement door was closed. We were sleeping upstairs, and we just didn't hear it. We are unsure, and we'll never really know that. We did have one wired one that was connected to all the other smoke detectors, but it was on the other end of the basement. And because it vented outwards, the smoke was pouring out. At that time, that's what created this giant fire and flame that I saw from my bedroom window when I woke up. It was all coming out that basement door and up. When we were able to exit the house and hit the sidewalk and heard that explosion, that was likely when that fire hit our grill, and we had a propane tank there. And that big boom, when fire hits a propane tank, because it's enclosed, it will make a sound that sounds like an explosion compared to when it hit that gas line. And so that engulfed the whole house at that point because it exploded, hit the top of the roof, and then the entire house was completely on fire at that point. With that being said, that is a crazy series of events to occur. And my husband and I, we have been able to sit with it because we know that this is rare. Rare things do happen, though, and it's still important to talk about them and try to prevent them. Before we go into all causes of fires, I would love for Chief Wells to break down electrical fires. What are ways we can do to prevent them? And are there any takeaways from our story that we can use to help others feel safer at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So while you mentioned that the particulars around your fire were extremely rare, sort of a perfect storm scenario, electrical fires themselves are not completely rare. It's the third most common cause of home fires in the U.S. And some of the things that you mentioned are oftentimes the culprits: overloaded outlets, faulty wiring, space heaters, outdated electrical systems, damage to electrical systems from renovations that cause more of a load on the system than the system was designed for. All of those things can create heating in a potentially already damaged system. That is not at all uncommon. And while I think it's good to have an understanding of how these systems work, none of us are really licensed electricians. So bringing in a qualified licensed electrician to have a look at that system, and particularly if you buy a new home or you perform any kind of renovations, you do any kind of at-home things, it's just a health checkup for your home's electrical system to make sure that it's safe and operating well.
We know when new homes are built, right, that they have thorough evaluations in order to pass their inspections. Is that something, though, that you would say is a way to give people more peace of mind, is after any renovation or even when you move into a new home, even if something doesn't show up on an inspection, for that peace of mind is having that checkup
Absolutely.
with an electrician?
Absolutely.
And that's something you would just call an electrician company and just say, hey, can I have a checkup?
Yes, I think so. Most of us don't live in a brand new home or not a home that we built. So I think it's a great idea to just contact an electrician and say, hey, this home is 20 years old or whatever. I would like for somebody to come out, do a little bit of a diagnostic, make sure that everything is up to current code as much as can be and is safe.
Now, are there any situations that should make someone think, hey, something might be going on with my electric, I should have that checked out? Or there are warning signs that maybe you've heard of people say, oh, this happened before my fire, if I'd only
Absolutely
looked into this.
It's not at all uncommon for people to report flickering lights or a burning plastic smell, popping, those types of things. What we see sometimes is electrical systems are designed to have some of these fail-safe measures, and when someone's breaker trips, it generally trips for a reason. But oftentimes people see that as just an inconvenience rather than the symptom of an underlying problem, and they'll flip that breaker back and forth several times, and it'll continue to cycle and cycle and cycle, and then there's a fire. So, yeah, I've heard that many times throughout my career.
And so I know you mentioned overloaded outlets. I'll just plug one of those long things. I have multiple plugs into an outlet.
Sure.
So that I can plug more things in. How do you know if you're plugging too many things in?
I think in general, power strips that are rated by or listed by UL or a similar type company are generally safe. But what you don't want is appliances that draw a lot of electricity should not be plugged into extension cords or any of those types of plugs or surge protectors or anything like that, because they draw so much. So things like a space heater, any type of appliance needs to go directly into a plug and not into a surge protector or a power strip.
I think that's very helpful, especially around the holidays when you're plugging in a bunch of Christmas things. Is there advice on that? Is it common to cause an issue with outdoor lighting or any with Christmas trees and stuff when we're trying to get every single string plugged
I'm picturing
in?
National Lampoon's Christmas
Yes,
Vacation.
exactly.
I'm a big fan of LED. LED lights do not create any type of heat, and they are very energy efficient. So that's a personal favorite of mine. We've transitioned all of our Christmas lights over to LED.
That's what I'm going to buy next. Thank you for that.
And I think oftentimes with decorations, we are nostalgic, and the Christmas tree that was handed down from Grandma many years ago, honestly, probably shouldn't be plugged in. So just be extremely cautious with those things as they age.
And I know one thing, after our house fire, I was told about a product that I didn't know existed at all. And so just for our listeners, you can talk to your homeowner's insurance or investigate it yourself. Is called a team device. We actually have one now, and it's really a nice tool just to have a little bit more information of what's going on in your electrical system as well. You just plug it into your outlet, it goes to an app on your phone, and it's monitoring the actual electric system in your house, looking for any of those hot spots per se that possibly could have been detected in our house that night. And it will give you alerts that come to your phone if they do notice something, so you can get someone out there immediately to have it investigated. So We'll be sure to link that on our show notes, but it is a great option. I know it at least gives me some better peace of mind knowing what I've been through.
I think the other thing that you mentioned happened with your perfect storm of things and makes me wonder is the smoke detector. How do you know if you do have basement smoke detectors? How do you know if they're wired or not?
A couple of different things to consider. One is whether or not the smoke alarm is hardwired, which would mean that it is connected to a source of electricity other than a battery. So it's connected to your home's electrical system. Newer smoke alarms can be hardwired with a battery backup, which is not at all uncommon, or they may have a 10-year sealed lithium-ion battery, which is another good option because most smoke alarms, in general, you shouldn't push them past about a 10-year lifespan anyway. But the other connotation for wired is that many smoke alarms, particularly modern construction, they're interconnected so that if a smoke alarm in the basement were to activate, it would also activate the ones on the second floor, better alerting occupants who may be sleeping in remote areas. And so the way to find out if they are interconnected or not is to simply test. So have somebody on the second floor, have somebody in the basement, you test one, all should sound.
That's honestly something I was not familiar with. But I do think, looking back, something to learn, I think that would have been very helpful in our situation. Had our smoke detector in the basement that was near it, probably would have picked that up and if they were all connected, cause ours to go off in our room. And could have given us a little bit more time. I'm not sure it would have necessarily saved our house just because of our specific situation and the rarity of it. But I do think that would have made somewhat of a difference for us. Speaking of, we can stay on the smoke detectors for a moment here, and then I do want to go back and talk about other causes of house fires. When we talk about smoke detectors, so you said that usually 10 years, we should not have them over 10 years. What are some other things that people may not realize about smoke detectors that are misconceptions?
So they are extremely reliable. Smoke alarms work on a pretty basic technology, and it's essentially a photoelectric sensor that, when interrupted by smoke particles, will trip the circuit and make the alarm sound. It's very tried and true, very reliable. So there's a couple of things that can cause them to fail, and the most common is human intervention. People will either cover up their smoke alarms during renovations, or more often than not, a smoke alarm will sound and they'll take out the battery, they'll disconnect the alarm, they'll stuff it somewhere because the sound is annoying. So that's probably the most frequent reason that they will fail. And then age. Once you get past that 10-year, it's hard to say that it's completely reliable.
Is there something that happens at 10 years to let you know at that? I'm just trying to, it's hard enough for me to remember to do something every day, but remembering every 10 years, I don't know, should we just set reminders on our phones?
No, I think with the sealed batteries, the sealed lithium-ion batteries, if it's not hardwired, then I think it's likely to maybe start chirping at some point in time, which is also a sign that it may need just a battery change. One of your newer alarms may just have a 9-volt battery that needs to be changed. But beyond that, there's not a lot. Now, in my home, when I moved in, they were just discolored from age. And so our house was 20 years old when we bought it. The smoke alarms, I'm sure, were original. That sort of caused us to say, okay, we need to go through and probably replace these.
Yeah. Maybe on the inside with a Sharpie when you
Yes.
put it in or something.
I think that's a great idea. I know, and we'll probably talk more about the services that we offer, but when we install a smoke alarm for someone, we have a sticker on it that has a little logo from us and then the date that it was installed.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Always do that. And now, growing up, I always heard this, and maybe this is something that could be useful, is you should test your smoke detectors twice a year. A good cue to use is the time changes, because those happen twice a year. Is that a reasonable amount of time twice a year to check them, or what would you recommend?
I would recommend testing them monthly and then changing the batteries twice a year. When you spring forward and fall back, great time to remember to change the batteries if you have the 9-volt battery-operated version.
Yeah, and I guess when you are testing those, that'd be a good time if you have kids to let them listen to that, and so they know what that sound is if they're the first ones to hear it.
Yeah, and I think human behavior is such that when a smoke alarm goes off, our first thought is not that there's an emergency. Oftentimes it's either what's causing the false alarm or what is that sound. So I think that's a great point. That's an optimal time to reiterate, when the smoke alarm goes off, let's treat it like it's an emergency and let's practice our home escape plan. And that way, when it happens in the middle of the night, the family is a little bit more prepared.
Yeah, we would definitely want to go into that into more detail. But to finish out some of our smoke detector questions, one thing I did want to mention, if someone has difficulty hearing, are there other options that you can install in your home?
There are visual cue alarms, and I believe there may even be some that will vibrate, for example.
That's good, especially because I know many elderly people who wear hearing aids, they take them out at night. And so not necessarily something that they are thinking about, oh, hey, I've got hearing aids now. Maybe I need to also think about my smoke detectors and having a different option in my house. Another thing that I know in our situation, our security system was some of the first alarms, not our smoke detectors that we heard. Is there value in having systems that are interconnected like that?
Yeah, I think there are. And I think it's always a good idea to look at your individual situation and make an assessment from there. But having systems that are interconnected, getting help on the way is never a bad thing.
And is that something that when people aren't at home is a way that a house, are you all called to the scene because of security systems sometimes?
We actually have been. Yeah. And motion detectors, for example, will pick up the movement of smoke sometimes before a smoke alarm will.
So do you know, Sarah, did your security system call for you or?
I'm actually not sure. I'm assuming it did because there was multiple glass breaks. Usually it calls the police specifically in that situation. But my neighbor heard me screaming and called around the same time. So I'm unsure of what hit the dispatch actually in that situation. But because of that, it made me think, oh, having all this interconnected, if we weren't at home, it could have gotten someone to the scene quicker just because it called the system. Now, you mentioned this, and I have grown to know about this, and I didn't know about it before, but what service does the Lexington Fire Department offer individuals in our community when it comes to inspecting smoke detectors?
Sure. So we actually have a community service bureau, and it's a wonderful team of our folks who do lots of different things. But one of our most popular programs is our smoke alarm installation program. And we will go anywhere in Fayette County, regardless of an individual's ability to pay, and install smoke alarms to bring them up to current code. Typically, I think the average house, if it's completely unprotected, would get somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6 smoke alarms and being installed correctly by professionals. And regardless of whether or not you're comfortable getting on a ladder or whatever else, we can come in and we can do that for you. It's very easy to access. And for those of our listeners who are outside of Fayette County, many other organizations offer similar programs.
No, that is great because I was unaware of this,
Yeah.
but I do know that many people that I know have used this service now. And once they came, they had a great experience and said it was helpful. Not only did they do that, but they did some teaching about fire safety in their own home when they were there at the home installing.
And that's actually a separate service that we will do, a home fire safety inspection, but oftentimes those two are lumped together.
And when it comes to having smoke detectors in your home, something that I don't think everyone necessarily knows is you should really think about having one not only on every single floor, but in every single bedroom. Are there other places that you would recommend people look and be like, oh, there's not a smoke detector here, or there that are missed?
Code has evolved through the years, and the current code, I think you're correct, is one on every level and in every sleeping area. And I think that's a reasonably good, safe place to start. But again, every home is unique. And so you kind of have to look at your unique situation and where you may need. For example, my basement is really divided off into a finished and an unfinished space. And then there are doors and walls that separate those two. And so certainly I would want one on either side of that partition, and the same for a garage or various living spaces or storage spaces.
That is very helpful because, again, renovations happen and sometimes maybe one that was somewhere doesn't get put back up. And so it's always important to think about that. I just love that this service exists because I think it takes the question out of it and you have an expert there to give you the answer that you need. Moving on from smoke detectors, I do want to talk about other causes of fires because I know in our situation, we didn't have the top cause of a fire occur. Can we go into a little bit more detail of what are those common ones that you see, as well as how we can work to prevent them as well?
Sure, absolutely. We'll draw statistics primarily from the U.S. Fire Administration, although we do have local statistics that very closely mirror what we see nationally. So the number one cause of home fires is cooking. And as much as I like to think of myself as a very careful chef, I think All of us have experienced times when the grease got too hot or we laid down the tea towel too close to the stove or something like that. So extremely common. And that's one of those scenarios where I think a little bit of pre-planning goes a long way. So having a method of smothering kitchen fire, having a ABC fire extinguisher nearby is going to be a huge benefit. Heating equipment oftentimes comes in as a number 2, and that is a broad swath. Everything from chimney fires, which are extremely frequent, another thing that really needs maintenance. Just like electrical systems require maintenance, if you have a wood-burning stove or fireplace, it should be inspected and maintained every year. Very common. And then I think incendiary fires that were intentionally set, whether it was a child playing with or whether it was an act of a criminal act, they're unfortunately more common than we would like. So those along with electrical systems are the most common.
All right, we talk about this a little
There's
bit more.
lots to unpack. I know.
Cooking fire is what I feel like I could see that happening easily for people. I cook a lot, and so I know that you're supposed to smother it. But in my mind, I also feel like in that situation, throwing a towel on top would worry me because then you think, I'm going to set the towel on fire.
I would personally recommend smothering with a lid if you have access to one, as opposed to a towel. I wouldn't disagree. I think that would make me nervous. Yeah.
Okay. What about if I just keep a fire blanket in the kitchen? Is that a good idea?
So fire blankets, I think if they are used per the manufacturer's specification, could be effective, particularly in a scenario like a cooking fire. The thing that worries me a little bit with those is how close is it? How accessible is it? How much time do you waste unpackaging? So it's one of those things. I wouldn't let the first time that you actually look at the directions be the time that you need it in an emergency. If you're going to have one, I think they potentially could be a wonderful product. You just need to be careful and make sure that you've looked at it ahead of time. You know where it's stored. It's close by.
And with that being said, this is also a reason to have a fire extinguisher in the house. When should you be like, okay, this is big enough, I need to pull this out?
I would always err toward overreacting. Fires grow so exponentially fast that by the time your brain processes what's happening and you've made the decision to act or not act, it's probably already growing and getting out of hand. So again, I would err on the side of maybe overreacting. If you think you're going to need that fire extinguisher, grab the fire extinguisher. And it's a much easier deal to clean up a little bit of dry chemical powder than it is to replace a home.
Let's talk about cooking-related fires and grills. Can you go into that situation? Now I'm a little leery of propane tanks because of ours. But what are some safety measures that people should think about when they're cooking outside?
One of the most common things is the fact that many of the things that we would grill produce grease, and the grease then falls down and oftentimes can get out of control. I would be very cautious about what it is that I'm grilling, and then have maybe an oven mitt or something close by so that you can close the lid of the grill if it does in fact get out of hand, and turn off the supply of the propane or natural gas, whatever is powering your grill.
Yeah, because staring at the fire in the moment, you may not think about that. So it's always good to have a plan in place when it can occur, because those come out of nowhere and they can really surprise you.
Yes, and oftentimes it's inattention that can let that problem get bigger. So we're outside grilling, we're talking to our neighbors, we step away, and next thing we know, the grill's on fire. It's probably close to the house, and so that can create a lot of issues.
And then on that same note of outside, what about fire pits? I haven't had one since our fire, but we are a family that has always liked making s'mores and having a fire pit on those nice nights. What are some safety precautions related to those that can give you confidence in using them?
So I think the number one tip that I would give is keep it small. So it needs to be a fire that is correctly sized for whatever device you're using, whatever fire pit you're using. Fire pits that you purchase should have a spark arrestor, which is typically some measure of mesh that cuts down on the number of sparks that come out. Keep an eye on the weather. If it's going to be windy or it's been very dry, avoid using the fire pit. And then only dry wood. I think sometimes there's a desire to burn something other than just dry wood in there, and I would discourage that.
Like leaves and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Leaves create a tremendous amount of sparks, and those little embers can absolutely go and light up dry grass or any number of things.
Another one, you had mentioned this, is talked about the chimneys, but space heaters. I know that in general, fires are more common in the winter because of different ways people are trying to heat their home. What are some ways to use a space heater safely if someone does use one?
So again, like we discussed with electrical fires, they need to be plugged directly into a wall outlet as opposed to a power strip or an extension cord. Extension cords are generally not rated for heating equipment. So ensure you avoid that. And then just keep a 3-foot safe space around that heater. It should be at least 3 feet away from all combustibles. And then children and pets oftentimes can run around and bump into things. So just ensure that that safe perimeter exists.
A bucket that is not one of the top causes, but I feel like I've heard about it more often, is lithium batteries causing issues on many electronics or electric things like scooters, e-bikes. What have you seen occur with that, or any advice related to those?
So we could probably spend an entire podcast just on lithium-ion batteries. It is something that is emerging in our profession. It's something that we are watching very closely because when a lithium-ion battery is damaged, it can combust in what's known as a thermal runaway. And in that process, it is explosive fire growth. And while that in and of itself is dangerous, if you think about the uses of lithium-ion batteries, it makes it exponentially more dangerous because people have these small electronics on them, on their persons. Or what oftentimes we are seeing across the country is mobility devices. So like e-scooters and e-bikes, if someone lives in an apartment, they bring that in with them. And where do they set it? Near their front door, which may be their only escape route. So when these things do fail and they fail explosively, you have essentially cut off your only escape. So they can be extremely dangerous. With that said, they're an amazing energy source, and they provide lots of the things that we appreciate in technology today. What I would caution people about with lithium-ion batteries is, one, ensure that it's purchased from a reputable source, and then really monitor for anything odd. If it is damaged, if it starts bulging, if it starts putting off an odor, you really need to not use it and then take safety precautions such as storing it in a metal container with either sand or kitty litter, and then reaching out to an organization that can recycle it. I think you can contact 311. The city of Lexington can give you information on that. I know there are retailers in Lexington that will recycle or assist with the recycling of lithium-ion batteries. And I don't mean to scare people or make it sound like they're all bad, but it is definitely a technology that maybe the fire safety hasn't caught up with yet.
And with that being said, I even have noticed that now you can even buy containers that are fire-safe containers that put ones that are removable so you can store them there. So it gives you some comfort in that as well.
Yes.
Just because I feel like so many devices have these batteries today.
Absolutely.
What are some other things that we might be having around us all the time that have lithium batteries?
Oh, gosh. While I think we would all always discourage vaping, that is one of the very common things that we're seeing that they're combusting because of the lithium-ion batteries that's in these small vaping devices. People carry them in their pockets. And, that there's a reason why when you go to get on a plane these days, one of the questions that they ask is about lithium-ion batteries, cellular devices. It's just any number of portable charging devices.
And so that can just be in your pocket and just catch on fire.
It can. It absolutely can. Now, if you are using these devices as intended, they've not suffered any damage, you're not witnessing any signs of damage to the battery, there's no odor, no bulging, it's not overheating, doesn't feel hot to the touch, then you're fine. It's when these batteries are damaged or aftermarket batteries that are a little bit more dangerous.
Well, that's really good tips. It's just being aware if you have a device that has those, being like, okay, is it too hot? Does it look weird? Does it smell weird? And at that point, we need to be done with it.
And where do you store your e-bike or e-scooter? Make sure that it's not in your line of escape.
That's a great thought.
With this, you said specifically, I think it is helpful to understand how frequent are fires in the city of Lexington.
So we'll have anywhere from 175 to probably just over 200 fires a year, 175 fires in 2024 that we investigated, probably not including a number of smaller fires, but those were the fires that were significant enough to be investigated by our investigators. And it happens more frequently than people recognize, I think, because it very rarely happens to us. It's very easy to dismiss the danger that really does exist.
I think another thing is understanding like how common is a total loss like our home was. Is that the majority of fires that you all put out, or is that actually not the most common situation?
A fire of the magnitude that you experienced is exceedingly rare. Less than probably a half dozen per year would occur with that level of damage. But even in what we would consider a more routine fire, room and contents fire or a kitchen fire, individuals still suffer significant trauma. They could be out of their homes for months while repairs take place. So certainly not to minimize the extent of other fires, but yours was a very rare fire.
Another thing that we learned from our situation is not just our house, is how quickly it can spread on a street. And we were just very thankful because of how quickly we acted. The firefighters arrived on the scene just as the fire hit the roof of our neighbors, and they were able to get it out and save her home completely. It's just, I'm still amazed by how fast this is and why it's so important to be able to act quickly on your feet. And that's where I want to now talk about a home evacuation plan, because this part of our story is just, I do feel like there was a divine intervention here. But the week of our fire, we actually talked about this. And I'll step back. Years ago, we received a book called Fireman Small, because as I mentioned earlier in the show, my grandfather was a firefighter and my maiden name's Small. His name was Arnold Small. And someone had given that book to us. And in that book, it went over fire safety and talking about evacuation plans. So when my oldest was little, we read that book and we're like, oh, we should talk about an evacuation plan. It really hadn't even come to our minds at that point. But that was years ago that we had first thought about it. But the week of our fire, we randomly talked about a fire evacuation plan. And I think it was crucial in our situation. My husband was joking about our laundry chute and how our girls could just slide down that in an emergency. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? We need to talk about how to exit our home if there's a fire. It was about a 30-minute talk that we went and talked about if there's a fire in the back of the house, is there a fire in the front of the house? What are the ways can we exit our house using a ladder to get out of the window? And we purchased one. We went into this great detail that week. So the morning that the fire happened, because it was so fresh in our mind, I think that was huge for my children. Sometimes we really think about, we don't want to bring up these scary situations with our kids because it's uncomfortable to talk about. But now that we've been through this and knowing that we had that discussion right before it happened, I truly think that is one of the things that helped my children cope, because they knew that it was something that could happen because we had talked about it and that we had a plan. I think that was very valuable. And even in that moment when I yelled at them, fire in the back of the house, out the front door, check for safety, they did not even flinch. They just executed everything and immediately went to our neighbors and started knocking on the door because we talked about that. Now that I've looked into this more, there's some additional things that I would want in my home evacuation plan, but I would love to hear your take on what you recommend for people to do with their families so they feel prepared if they ever experience this to get out safely.
I think, again, you and your family are absolutely to be commended. And you probably at this point are more qualified to talk about a home evacuation plan than I am. But you're absolutely right. The fact that you had the discussion, that your family was aware of what to expect when that happened, it was probably the difference between success and a very chaotic and potentially tragic outcome. So every household should have a fire evacuation plan. And I would not just have one option. There can't just be an option A, because option A may be blocked. So you have to develop those contingencies and practice them regularly, even to the point of, okay, kids, we're going to go downstairs and go out the front door. And then maybe what's plan B if the stairs are blocked or if we can't get out the front door? So at least two ways out. And then there may come a time, and no one likes to think about this, but there may come a scenario where you are trapped in your home that is on fire, in which case it is our job as the fire department to come and get you. The most powerful tool that you have at your disposal is a closed door. And that really is what buys us the time to get to you and to make that rescue.
And what is the closed door doing?
Most people do not die from burns who perish in a house fire. They die because of smoke inhalation, carbon monoxide poisoning from the byproducts of combustion. So not only are you keeping the fire at bay, but you are really tremendously blocking those products of combustion from entering the room. And there's some great videos online through the National Fire Protection Administration and through the U.S. Fire Administration that demonstrate the power of a closed door. And there's actually a program called Close Before You Doze, and that is encouraging people to close their bedroom doors when they go to sleep at night. We discussed how important it was to have the door closed between your garage and your home, and that's a fire-rated door. But even a hollow core typical bedroom door provides a remarkable amount of protection for at least time for us to get there and effect that rescue.
I think about leaving your door open so you can hear what's going on in your house.
Yes.
But really, that's not necessarily the safest.
No, interconnected smoke alarms and a closed bedroom door provide absolutely the highest measure of safety.
Another thing that I've read, so your door is closed, you're hearing things, and then one thing is to touch your doorknob, right, to see if it's hot, because that can be a sign that the fire's right on the other side versus it's not. It's okay to open and see what's going on.
Yes.
Is that?
I think that's a reasonable thing to do. The reality is, unless the fire is right up against your door, it's probably not going to heat up the doorknob enough for you to be able to physically tell. But you may see things like smoke pushing through the cracks, which is a definite indicator that I would not open that door because you're going to expose the room to a potentially very hazardous situation.
Now, if you are in a situation where smoke is already in your room and you're needing to escape, it's best to hit the ground in order to do that for exit.
Yes,
is that correct?
Smoke and products of combustion are always going to want to rise. That's just the physics of heat and cool. And so, as low as you can possibly be.
And for someone who has a bedroom on the second story, what are your thoughts on ladders?
I think it's a great plan B or plan C.
Okay.
I think it's not at all a bad idea to be equipped with one. In fact, I remember distinctly responding to a fire where someone was able to self-evacuate because of a fire escape ladder. I thought, wow, those things really do work. But I wouldn't count on that as my plan A.
I know something that we have thought about is understanding the ability, are our children even able to use this, to give them that as a tool? Because the last thing you want to do is give them that as a tool and they don't even know how to use it. And in an emergency, it could cause more harm than good.
One thing we thought about was we had one, and then, of course, with Sarah's situation, we've overthought every single thing in our own home. But we were like, oh, we should take it out of the package. So we did that. We took it out of the package. Would you recommend that?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Again, similar to some of the other things that we discussed, I wouldn't let the night that there's an emergency be the first time that you've looked at or practiced with any of this stuff.
Yeah, I will say that. For someone that was in this situation, I didn't even remember to grab my phone, and my phone is usually by me all the time. So don't expect yourself to learn something new in an emergency.
So plan A should be getting out a safe door.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then if you can't get to a safe door, window is next. Is that the kind of thought?
Certainly. You're going to have to look at your individual situation and make a judgment call. If there is a fire on the first floor that is preventing you from escaping out what would be your plan A, you can't go down the stairs. You're now confined to the second floor. Second floors can vary a lot. On the front side of my house, I could probably hang out of my second floor window and fairly comfortably drop down without injuring myself too bad. The back side of my house, I probably should wait and plan on being rescued because I'm most certainly going to injure myself badly if I try to come out on the back side of my house from the second floor. Every home is different. Every situation is different, but that's part of the importance of having a plan. And again, I would encourage folks who are in Fayette County, contact the Lexington Fire Department. We'll come out, we'll do a home safety inspection. We'll look at your individual situation. If you're outside of Fayette County, contact your local fire department. I'm sure that they're likely to do the same.
Yeah, that was something that we had talked about with our girls is we had a covered deck. And so one of our exit strategies was to go out a window and just sit on the deck until someone came to get us.
Yes.
In that sense. And another thing is thinking about if you have children, have they ever opened a window? Because you also want that they are able to get to the ladder if someone's there to save them.
It's not at all uncommon in homes to have the old school windows that may be painted shut or extremely heavy. And I know in our home, until we put in replacement windows, my daughter couldn't manipulate the big heavy wooden windows.
In those situations, I imagine even with the ladder, you're able to break the window to get in.
Absolutely.
In that. So it's not that if you do have that situation that someone can't help you, but all things to talk about with your family. When people are exiting a home and in these situations, what are some common mistakes that people make in the middle of a fire? And because I think this is important, because everyone thinks that they're going to do X, Y, or Z flawlessly. But I don't think that's the case. I didn't even have shoes on. So what are those mistakes that unfortunately cause more harm than good?
So again, I think taking from your story, the fact that you had just talked about this really changed the outcome from what many individuals who fail to plan or prepare would experience. The American Psychological Association and the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, and many others have researched and written on human behavior during a fire. And what they found is almost counterintuitive. It's the fact that people almost freeze, spend a long time trying to recognize if there even is a hazard and then how to react. And so I think the biggest mistake probably that people make is just assuming that everyone is going to react rationally. And so really having that plan and encouraging folks to practice it is the number one trip for encouraging our families to react appropriately. Other than that, smoke alarms sound for a reason. So again, as you're testing those alarms, it's a good time to reiterate how important it is to react when you hear that noise.
And I know many people talk about, oh, if I'm in a fire, I'm going to grab X, Y, or Z. I feel like we've all had that conversation at some point in our life. But I just want to reiterate to our listeners is that's just not going to happen, depending on this, because of seeing how quickly these can occur. You need to just get out. I do think that if we had started playing that game, oh, I want to be sure I grab this and I want to grab that, and going back in the house after we first exited it, it was in that time that the explosion happened that could have been very traumatic. Safety and getting out of the home is number one, then calling 911 and not even pausing to do that. And I was grateful that I am very loud and my neighbor even did it for me. But it is crucial not to have this extreme plan of action that you want to execute if there's a fire in your house to get things out.
Absolutely, yeah. And I didn't probably articulate that very well, but the plan should be how to get out and really very little else. How to contact 911 and how to get out.
I think, especially in my days of working in the hospital, I feel like we heard fire alarms frequently. I think I got desensitized to it. I would keep going with what I was doing for the patient until someone was like really coming in and being like,
Absolutely.
This
You
one's
gotta go.
real. But I think that's terrible because you don't know that time is the time that it's not going to be a real reason to evacuate. So especially in your home, every time it goes off, you should not be investigating, is this real? You should get out and then figure it out.
Yeah, I think so. I think ensuring that everybody is on a path out of the house, and particularly as a parent, we bear the responsibility for our children. And then if there's no visible smoke or fire or presumable reason why the alarm should be going off, then you can maybe go, the basement look clear? Does the second floor look clear? I don't want to discourage people from investigating every time, but the first sign of smoke, the first sign of any type of fire or anything dangerous like that, get out, stay out. We'll investigate for you, and that's what we're there for.
Would anyone ever get in trouble for or have a cost because their smoke alarm went off and they called the fire department?
No, we do not charge for false alarms. If we respond a couple of times, we may hook you up with our community service bureau who can help find out why these alarms are going off. From time to time, people have alarms that are just situated in bad places, close to a shower where there's going to be steam, or too close to where they do a lot of cooking. And we can even help you reestablish those in different places.
And when firefighters arrive on a scene, I know they ask a lot of questions. What are some of the important things that they need to know about your home if there is a fire?
Well, first and foremost, the first question that we're always going to ask is everyone out? And that is the most important thing, because all of our operations are going to be dictated on whether or not it's a search and rescue operation. And regardless of anything else that's happening, if you say, yes, someone is still inside, our priorities change to immediately going to rescue mode. So that is the first question always. We will ask oftentimes, are there any additional hazards? Do you have any pets inside still? And one of the things I became accustomed to asking when I was still riding the truck was any information that you can give me about the layout of the home that's going to help me. I remember responding one time to a home that looked like it was oddly constructed when we pulled up, and there was fire coming from the second floor. And I said, where am I going to find the steps? And the individual was able to say toward the back of the house. That was as much as they could process and get out. And it took me a while to find the steps, but at least I knew roughly where to go. So they may ask some general questions about the layout, how to get to certain areas.
And I know some of the other things that we were asked that day, are there firearms, are there oxygen tanks, other things that could continue to combust?
Yes.
Obviously, the propane tank had already gone, but those were things that I know that they were curious about, and because it helps them be able to prepare as well. We talked a little bit about some fire safety products, but I think actually knowing how to use these and where to keep them is crucial. So we talked about fire extinguishers, especially kitchen fires. How many should you have in your house? Where should you be keeping these? What do we do with them once we buy them?
The first thing is to make sure that you buy the appropriate fire extinguisher. I like a good multi-purpose Class A, B, C extinguisher. That's the most commonly utilized fire extinguisher. And much like smoke alarms, I think it's a good idea to have one on every level. And then from there, every home is unique. So you're going to have to kind of look at what it is that you do. If you are somebody that likes to tinker in the garage, I would certainly have a pretty decent sized fire extinguisher in the garage. I like to cook, so we keep one close to the kitchen where I could access that. If you think you might need one, I would put one nearby and then check those periodically because they are charged with pressure in order to be able to expel the extinguishing agent. And so they have to be checked to make sure that they have maintained that charge. And sometimes they can be refilled by a qualified provider, and sometimes they just need to be replaced.
What about the little handheld ones that you just squeeze that looks like a squeeze bottle?
I think for something like keeping handy near the kitchen, those are probably a good product.
Something that's we've been made aware of just from, again, your all's wonderful service is sometimes we think, oh, I want my fire extinguisher right by my stove. But it may be that it needs to be in the kitchen, but not right by your stove, because if that's what's on fire, you're not going to be able to grab your fire extinguisher.
Exactly. My laundry room is adjacent to my kitchen, and I have one right there, readily accessible.
And when using one of these, I remember as a kid, the word pass was used as a way to describe how to use a fire extinguisher. Can you explain to our listeners what that even is and how they can use it to use a fire extinguisher?
So that's great. Pass, P-A-S-S, stands for pull. So pull the pin. Aim, you will aim the nozzle at the base of the fire. Squeeze the trigger on the extinguisher, and then sweep. So you want to apply the extinguishing agent in a sweeping motion, which I just demonstrated and our listeners can't see.
It was a nice sweep.
It was a very good sweep. Okay. And I guess for grills, because I don't think I've ever had a fire extinguisher near outside. Is that something to consider having when you're grilling, something available in that situation?
I think for those of us who utilize outdoor barbecue grills as well as fire pits, it'll be a good idea to have one handy. And maybe that is what buys you the time to be able to shut off the propane or the natural gas.
Okay. We did talk about fire blankets, and I think that they have become more popular just from marketing in general. When are fire blankets actually useful? Because if a fire's too big, they're not going to help.
Yeah, I think they would be for an incipient or beginning stage fire that you feel like you can manage pretty quickly. And they will be as useful as they are handy to get a hold of. So if it is very nearby, then I think it's probably appropriate and a great tool. If you have to go into the closet and look for it, I think I would go to plan B.
So something that also would be reasonable to have in the kitchen then, that to catch one of those very quickly. There's another thing that I saw, and I don't know if you've seen this, is a fireproof cloak.
Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings on the cloak. Certainly there would at some point in time potentially be a scenario where something like that would come in handy. But again, remember that the majority of fatalities from fire do not happen because of burns. They happen because of smoke inhalation, and the cloak offers little, if any, protection from smoke or carbon monoxide. The other thing is you're wrapping yourself in something that is likely to potentially inhibit your ability to escape quickly. So I do have very mixed feelings on them. It's not something I would utilize in my own home.
Another option that I think is becoming more common in new construction, but home sprinkler systems. Are they effective? Have you seen them in Lexington at all?
So there are some residential sprinkler systems in homes in Lexington. As a rule, home sprinkler systems are incredibly effective. They are extremely effective. A fatality in a home that is sprinkled is almost unheard of. Less than 1% of all fire fatalities in the U.S. occurred in homes that were sprinkled. If you have a home that is sprinkled, you have an 89% lower chance of dying than in a home with no automatic sprinkler system. So they operated properly 95% of the time, which is a pretty good rate. And in general, it was between 1 and 5 sprinkler heads that activated. Sprinkler systems can become very complicated. They are engineered for whatever unique circumstance the building that they're protecting is. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing, but in general, home sprinkler systems are designed to keep a fire in check to allow an occupant the opportunity to escape and the fire department to get there to finish the extinguishments. I think they're a phenomenal technology.
Thinking about what could be the con of that, do they go off like when they shouldn't and then ruin all your stuff? Is that...
I've not personally seen a residential sprinkler system that operated when it wasn't supposed to. A residential system operates off of the municipal water supply, which means just like your pipes coming in that feed your faucet or your shower or all of those things, the same size pipe comes in and feeds the sprinkler system, where in a commercial building, it's a much larger pipe and there's very strict codes about the different types of sprinkler heads and things like that. Residential sprinklers are a little bit less encumbered. Certainly, there's always the opportunity that those pipes could freeze and burst, but if that happens, the other pipes in your home are probably freezing and bursting as well. So I don't think that it really adds a significant risk of water damage or anything that you don't already have in your home.
So is cost the main reason why we don't see these regularly?
I think cost is. There has been a push over the last couple of decades by the National Fire Protection Association and other entities to mandate residential sprinklers. That has not been met with a lot of popularity. As one could imagine, it would add cost. And so, as with anything, it's always this balancing act. We want to ensure that homes are affordable, but we also want to ensure that they're well protected. So that legislation is going to have to work its way out over the next several years, but ultimately it is an option for people, and I think it's a good option to consider.
Another thing in homes, we had mentioned a little bit before, and when my husband exited the house, he closed our garage door. What happened is when the actual garage, we had lots of damage from mostly water and smoke, but the garage never caught on fire. So it was amazing that having that door closed, what it did. So what is your recommendations on those types of doors, and what purpose do they serve to have that at the garage?
Yeah, your situation, again, proved to be a little bit unique. The majority of the time, the fire-rated door between the garage and the home is to protect the home from the garage, not the garage from the home. But when you purchase a door or you speak with a contractor about installing a door, ask what the fire rating is, and that fire rating will be based on the amount of time. It'll be rated as a 1-hour door or a 2-hour door or something like that, and that's the amount of time that you can expect that door to withhold the fire on the other side and protect what's on the other side of the door. I think it's phenomenal, and a closed door can make all of the difference in the world.
Yeah, when the firefighters arrived, they put a giant fire blanket on our car. He drove one car out, but they put a blanket over his Honda Accord that I now believe is going to live forever. And because he had shut that door, it survived the fire, which was just remarkable that it was able to do. But it was, again, because he shut the door. So that it just proved that works tremendously. I think one of the last big buckets that we wanted to talk about was, and I found valuable for us, are these fireproof options that you can have in your house, whether it's a storage container or a safe. We were able to have some of our important documents. I think we needed to have more in there now that we've experienced that, and I can touch on that. But what have you seen at scenes? Do they typically work and survive a fire? Because ours wasn't in the hottest part of the fire. Have you all seen them truly stay completely intact on the scene of situations?
Yeah, I think the disclaimer here is going to be you have to look at the manufacturer's recommendations. You have to use them to the manufacturer's recommendations, and you can probably only expect them to perform as is advertised. With that said, my personal experience is I have seen them be incredibly successful. I can't tell you how many times we have found a pile of rubble, and within that pile of rubble is a safe that has undamaged documents inside or whatever it was that was there. Again, I think the prevalence of online shopping has made a lot of things accessible to us and not always high quality products. So this is one of those things. You're talking about incredibly important documents, birth certificates and all of those types of things. And I would make sure that I'm purchasing a reputable brand from a reputable company that is rated as high as I could find it.
I would, just from our experience, I would agree. Ours probably would have been, we had some still, it smelled smoky inside of it, and ours was a actual bag. I think moving forward, we'll always have the most heavy duty safe, just from our experience. And those essential documents, it is crucial. It's so important to be able to have those things at your access, because when you lose everything, like we lost our driver's license and our insurance cards, like anything that was in our wallets, being able to have our birth certificates still and our social security cards in there, it was easier to be able to put our life back together because we had saved those documents. And now that we've gone through this, some other things that I would really consider having in there are any really important documents, as well as if there is a huge sentimental item that is not normally displayed and you're just like, I want to keep this, put it in your safe so it is there on a regular basis and can save it that way. Other things are expensive items that you own, or any certificates of authenticity of something that you own that may be really special to you. That will be very helpful when you're going through the insurance process as well, keeping that in your fireproof safe and having some of those old photos in there. Luckily for me, my mom kept my whole childhood in photo albums, so I didn't have to worry about that. But thinking about my husband didn't necessarily have as many photos. Those are the things you're going to miss the most, and keeping them in your safe. So if you don't have that, I do think it is something that is worth spending money on, because even if it's not a fire, other natural disasters that can occur, it will help keep it safe.
Oh, absolutely.
When it comes to that. So before we conclude here, I do think, and we've mentioned this, we do have a lot of local listeners, but when it comes to these services that you mentioned that the Lexington Fire Department does provide for this community, is there a way for us as a community to give back for those services? Because I know you're saying that they're free. I know we have enjoyed being able to take advantage of that service. How can we help in return?
Sure. So we are actually the beneficiaries of some additional smoke alarms. Not only does the LFUCG provide us with funds for smoke alarms, but we also receive some alarms from the American Red Cross, which is a great partnership for us. And then our Fraternal Order of Firefighters, which is our 501c3 nonprofit arm, will provide us with smoke alarms. So I would think if individuals want to contribute to, for example, the Fraternal Order of Firefighters, they could do that in order to support the purchase of more smoke alarms so that we can continue this great project.
That's awesome. Once they come and give you that feeling of security, I know many friends and locally have wanted to be able to support them because they thought it was such a great service.
Definitely make sure you look into those if you're feeling like you need it. And we will put a link in the show notes if you want to give back to our wonderful fire department. So before we let you go, I just want to summarize, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things, some major take-home points from today. I think the biggest thing to think about is fires grow fast, and close your doors.
Yes.
The big thing
I think if we can drive home, close before you doze, and don't plan on having lots of time to make these decisions.
So be ready to act quickly, and you want to take time to go over all the options before you are in that emergency situation, and talk about all the plans that you need to potentially go through depending on where the fire may be in your home. In regards to electrical fires, don't ignore things like breakers,
tripping
absolutely, and lights flickering and things. Make sure any of your appliances that draw a lot of electricity, especially heating appliances, are plugged into the wall and you're not putting those into an extension cord. We're going to do LED lights for our Christmas lights.
You betcha.
And then the other thing, make sure that your smoke detectors are wired. You can do that by just going down to the basement if that's the one you're worried about, and test it and see if that is making the smoke alarms on the second floor go off. And then make sure that you're testing those monthly
and changing the batteries at least twice a year if you have the 9-volt batteries that need to be changed. Again, we have smoke alarm installation program with the fire department and home fire safety inspections. Also, remember to just really think through your kitchen and where you could potentially have a cooking fire in your kitchen, and that you are ready with your lid handy and can turn off the burner if you need to, but also have either a fire extinguisher or accessible fire blanket nearby. And pay attention to your fire pit and your grill as well. Make sure you have thought through your safety aspects for those. And then you taught me a lot about lithium-ion batteries. So just be aware of what you might have that maybe you don't even realize has a lithium-ion battery, and make sure you're being safe and watching for any signs of damage to that. Fire extinguishers are great. Make sure that you are getting an actual good one. Class ABC is what you mentioned, and
Yes.
I'll make sure I mention that in the show notes too, so you know what to look for. And make sure you have them on every level and maybe in the garage as well. Fire safes are a good way to protect any important documents or items that you want to keep safe. So, Sarah, thank you for telling us everything that you went through. I know it's
Yes,
not easy.
and I just want to ask our listeners, I opened up and shared my story because I really want to make a difference and prevent this for someone else. So if you've listened to this and have learned something, please share it with other loved ones out there. These simple measures can make a huge difference, and really want our story to take something bad and make something good out of it. If we can make a difference for someone else's experience, then it was all well worth it to me.
Thank you so much, Chief Wells.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you all for what you do.
And please tune in again next week. We are going to do a show that's shifting a little bit and talking about the financial impact and specifically how homeowners insurance works after a fire, because we've learned a lot in that situation as well. And it's really important to understand your coverage and what you actually have in your homeowner's insurance. So we have Hayes Featherston that's going to come on. He is our agent and has walked us through this whole process. And I know that I've received lots of questions about that as well, and I wanted to share that information with our listeners. So be sure to tune in to Part B.
We'll see you next week.